Chapter 3. Little data is big data. The future of personalization. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Roy Batty, portrayed by Rutger Hauer in Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. Ever had a relationship with someone who seemed to know you better than you know yourself? Maybe a parent, friend, lover, or therapist? Well, now robots, sensors, cameras, and apps on your phone are that someone. They collect a huge amount of data and micro-information about your little quirks and idiosyncrasies, including the way you use your store loyalty cards and credit cards, the way you walk through a shopping centre, and even the way you type into a keyboard. It's all being measured and archived. How much do you know about the data that's collected about you and how it's used? Where does all that data end up, and is it safe? Do you know how to protect yourself from having your data hacked? How could you and your behaviours be analysed and predicted? Does your location data show you went for drive-through fast food 3 times last week instead of going to the gym? The drops of data gather to form your personal data ocean and may well converge to create such a thing as a personalised digital twin. People my age, I'm in my 40s, never studied data management in school, let alone learned about smart devices or social media. My generation is the last to bridge 2 worlds, a world that understands the relationship between a pencil and a cassette tape, and a world in which almost everyone was born with a smart device in their hand and doesn't know or care what a cassette tape is. Did you see the video that went viral of a man who challenged a couple of 17-year-olds to dial a phone number using an old analogue phone in 4 minutes? They couldn't do it. One of my peers told me of a friend whose preteen child found a floppy disk in the home office desk drawer and asked her why she had 3D printed the save icon. The reason I find these amusing examples so worrying is that they demonstrate the translation issues that still exist between the digital and analogue worlds, and these affect business, risk, finance, and regulation. Data literacy is a socio-economic issue as well as a generational one. Using data to fight crime. Location data, also known as geospatial information, indicates where you, or rather your devices, are in space and time. Mobile phones have been used to triangulate lost victims in search and rescue operations, and network data has been used to solve crimes, such as the well-publicised 2002 murder of young girls Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman in the UK, when Jessica's mobile phone pinged a local tower when the murderer switched it off. New technologies can now pinpoint your actual location to within 5 centimetres when you make an emergency call, and you can still find a new iPhone after it has lost power or has been switched off. Forensic research has always had a close relationship with new and emerging technologies. Great examples include DNA fingerprinting and ground-penetrating radar that can scan for buried bodies. This application-driven aspect of new and emerging science gets a lot of attention and funding. I think that is, at least in part, due to the ability to prove the return on investment (ROI) for investors and shareholders. Many people willingly send their DNA to companies that locate their heritage and ancestry information. I have done this, and it was good fun to see where my genetics have derived from. I also ticked the box to allow the company to use my DNA for research purposes. I am a scientist after all. The ethics of using DNA database submissions and samples from innocent people to track and identify criminals is still up for debate, but the data is already being used in this way. Because some 20 people uploaded their DNA samples to find their family tree using a company in California called GEDmatch, police were able to identify and successfully prosecute the Golden State Killer in 2018 after 4 decades of work. I am comfortable with the idea that my DNA, if it were used for research or solving crimes, may help make the world a better place. DNA fingerprinting isn't the watertight technology it used to be, and genetic identity manipulation could already be used by organised criminals to avoid detection. When technology is demonstrated to be fallible, scientists design and test newer technologies. One new idea is active biometrics, Instead of just the words, numbers, and symbols we currently use to create passwords, the way you personally type that password is also unique, like a password within the password. Data and diagnosis. Biometric analysis can also be used to detect Parkinson's disease, be it through wearable accelerometers or through video-based AI software for personal identification and gait analysis. This field of research can also identify children with autism spectrum disorder through their foot placement. Such swift and automatic disease and neurodiversity diagnoses could lead to faster interventions, treatments, and support for the people affected. However, it could also lead to issues with health insurance or financial risk rankings. Imagine if your bank knew you had a neurodegenerative disease before you did. Would they tell you, or would they just blacklist you for credit? Your shopping habits can also let the cat out of the bag when it comes to personal health matters. A now infamous example of this is the 2011 outing of a pregnant teenager in the USA. Target's algorithms had figured out the teen was possibly pregnant via the data capture from her loyalty card and sent her coupons for baby items such as cribs and cute baby clothes. Her father was furious that his daughter was being targeted with such advertising and called the manager to complain. By the time the manager had investigated and called the father back a few days later, the teen had come clean and the father apologised to the manager. The fiasco caused many retailers to rethink their targeted advertising, figuring out ways to promote targeted products while avoiding their ethics being called into question. They might work out you're likely to be pregnant, but their marketing will now mix the pregnancy deals with non-pregnancy deals, such as for gardening equipment, so as to make it less obvious that they are delivering you bespoke, personalised content. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, it has been interesting to see the proliferation of wearable technology such as the Apple Watch, including options like oxygen monitoring. Personalised medicine via wearable technology can be extremely beneficial, especially when dealing with something life-threatening such as going through chemotherapy. A closed-loop health service in a remote community could, for example, have a setup like the following. A patient undergoing chemotherapy has a wearable device measuring skin temperature, heart rate, oxygen saturation, and so on. When their pulse starts to quicken and skin temperature starts to rise, their device sets off an alarm at a designated doctor's office, leading to a video call between the doctor and the patient. Then, as they are speaking, the doctor diagnoses a potentially deadly infection, triggering an order of antibiotics from a local pharmacy or community medical chest. While the doctor and the patient are still talking, a drone is deployed to deliver the antibiotics to the patient so they can start the course immediately with real-time monitoring and follow-up by the doctor and the technology over the next crucial hours. All the technology required to do this exists, but it is siloed. We lack the systems-led approach and the funding for such a thing. As in most medical or health scenarios, there are potentially many great solutions that would pay for themselves in lives saved, but there is little upfront investment in such systems. Data's dark side. We all have stories of social media advertisers reading our minds. My friends and I like to play with the algorithms sometimes. We know that apps such as Instagram have their microphones switched on and are therefore potentially always listening. So we say the same product name over and over again, and then that product miraculously appears in the advertisements on our apps. Data is even being harvested from your friends and family to better target you for sales. You might be targeted for certain brands of cars or cream cheese, not because of what your phone heard you saying, but what your friend's phone heard them saying. Jetson is an equally interesting and nightmare-inducing piece of technology created in the USA. It uses lasers and a technique called vibrometry to pick up your heartbeat, even through your clothing, and from some 200 metres away. If this isn't enough to give you the heebie-jeebies, then add it to the fact that the rhythm of your heartbeat is unique to you, just like your fingerprints, irises, and DNA. This means that you can be identified by Jetson in a crowd, and it is much more accurate than gait analysis or even long-range facial recognition. So, using Jetson for finding a wanted terrorist? Great! Using it in shopping malls or streets for targeted advertising? That's less likely to pass the water cooler test. What if your phone could pick up your pulse from your hand or your ear? Worryingly, there are even algorithms that can predict your voting habits, and this can then be used to target advertising to try and sway which way you'll vote. A commonly referenced example of this is, of course, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, in which Cambridge Analytica collected some 50 million Facebook users' data without their consent for the purposes of political advertising. The victims had completed personality tests, for which they were paid a few dollars via an app, and their answers were linked to their and their friends' personal data on Facebook, which was used to target political advertising during the 2016 US presidential election campaign. I don't think the founders of Facebook ever imagined a social media platform could shape the outcome of a presidential election. And yet here we are. The legal and ethical questions around data and how it can be handed over, sometimes unwittingly, will provide some of the most interesting and pressing debates of the next decade. Where does all this data go? Think about how long you've had your social media accounts. It's probably up to 15 years or so. 15 years of clicks, likes, comments and shares. All this adds up to a lot of data, not to mention all the personal information that you store in the cloud, as well as the never-ending, self-filling porridge pot that is your email inbox. Then add your WhatsApp, Messenger and iMessage use, and don't forget your accounts on Netflix, Disney Plus and other streaming services. The world is working more digitally than ever before, and every minute the bank of data grows exponentially. We heavily rely on data storage that might not even physically be in the same country as us, and we expect immediate access to all that we need. My mum always kept our baby photos in albums in the dining room cupboard. They were the one thing she would try to rescue if the house was on fire, she always said. My own baby's photos are all on my interconnected devices and iCloud, and then backed up with third-party online storage provider, so effectively I have 6 or 7 copies of each of the 20,426 photos and 1,198 videos on my iPhone. I also have copies on my social media accounts, but I don't show my kids' faces there. And my husband also has his own photos and videos and copies of these across social media. We share these images and videos across different communication apps and even bog-standard text messages. What on earth does this mean for the supply and demand function of data storage and the legal and financial and climate issues that come from this? Some have calculated that 21% of the world's electricity usage will be consumed by data centres by the year 2030. We aren't even talking about analysis and data processing here. Nearly half the electricity used by data centres is solely for cooling purposes. So it was a wise move for Facebook to establish data centres in Luleå, Sweden, some 70 miles south of the Arctic Circle. Some data centre companies are already calling themselves carbon neutral or aiming to offset their carbon footprint and use renewable energy to power themselves, either on-site or by building their own solar farms. Green data storage is in our future, that's for sure. It will be pushed there eventually by ESG investing and a shift in the culture of founders, shareholders and company directors. A lot of data is collected under contract or business arrangement, which means the collector is expected to keep all the data in all forms, raw, processed, archived, post-production and reporting for a defined period of time, say 7 years. This means that not only do you have to label, store, backup, archive, share, transport and handle this data, in accordance with any data or information management plan your organisation might require, you also have to guarantee it will be in an auditable form for legal and insurance purposes for a certain number of years after the project has finished. This is getting exceedingly time-consuming and expensive, and the data won't stop coming. The biggest worry about data is data tsunamis. Data that gains momentum and volume through the commingling or exponential growth of platform technologies. Some estimates state that 90% or more of all the data that currently exists across all our global systems was created in the last 2 years. We need to make sure when we collate, collect, merge and archive data that we do it within standardized metadata frameworks, and we create handlers for the data from AI based in deep machine learning, because it would cost too much to use humans for this. This could be something that quantum computing is applied to in the coming decade, alongside new journaling or registering systems. The fundamental usefulness of data depends on us being able to interrogate it, and quickly and with accurate results. Our society has come to expect instant gratification and responses, especially where technology is concerned. AI will be a necessary tool for us to handle the quagmire that could be created by data tsunamis. Data security. One fundamental premise that must underlie all these digital systems is that they are safe. The issue of cybersecurity has never been more important than it is today. Every single human being on this planet is at the mercy of the cybersecurity systems and processes that are put in place to prevent the hacking, disruption, and deletion of important data. This is something that our governments, banking institutions, insurance companies, and data storage facilities are constantly concerned with. Cyber attacks are increasing and are already so numerous that in Australia alone there are some 200 attempts reported every day. But many are blocked and don't get through to even being reported. Next time you have a few minutes to kill, Google cyber threat maps, and you'll see that the number of attacks is much higher than what gets reported. With one cybercrime reported every 10 minutes in Australia, there need to be more conversations about what cybersecurity means for us as individuals, as well as our workplaces and governments. I have lost count of the number of friends who have had their social media accounts hacked in one way or another. Some forget passwords and have old, defunct email addresses as their main email contact for them, while others have experienced full-blown identity theft. I vividly remember when my email account was hacked 15 years ago. This was before proper internet banking and smart devices, so if it happened now, I would be scared that my whole life would collapse like a house of cards, and I would be completely compromised financially and reputationally. Get back in the driver's seat. So, where does all of this leave the educated but somewhat bewildered person who's wanting to keep their data safe? The best advice I can give is to switch on two-factor authentication for all your social media and email accounts. This means people just can't steal your accounts through a simple hack, such as a password shared accidentally or a data leak from a trusted organisation. And we have seen a lot of those, such as from Marriott International, Oxfam Australia, MyFitnessPal and Canva. Two-factor authentication is opt-in rather than default, and I think that that's the wrong way around. It should be part of cyber hygiene and community responsibility. I am getting sick of being targeted by scammers who've managed to access my connections, LinkedIn and Instagram accounts. You can also visit haveibeenpwned.com, which allows you to check your email and mobile phone details to see if your information has been compromised. The nefarious distribution of personal details to spammers is tech abuse and is shamefully on the rise. If you're interested to learn more about technology regulation, I recommend engaging with the thought leaders at the Tech Policy Design Centre at ANU. The report, Tending the Tech Ecosystem, Who Should Be the Tech Regulator, is accessible on the Centre's website, and it's a great place to start if you want to learn more about the structures and issues guiding tech policy and the leaders in this field. Global educators can look to the Australian Digital Technologies curriculum, which contains aspects of cybersecurity education throughout. All Australian school students in years 7 to 10, which is ages 12 to 16, are taught this subject matter. But parents and grandparents might be wise to ask these students for advice. Wherever you live, there will be an education specialist in this area, such as YSafe in Australia. Ask if they have online resources and training you can access.